So what it comes down to is people with narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies tend to lean towards authoritarianism and will use whichever side of the political spectrum is expedient for them at the time. So, you may have seen Tim Pool post a tweet with, curiously enough, I'm not sure of his motivations there, but he did not link to this article. He just posted a screenshot of the headline of this article, which is on timcast.com, which is his website. So it's like he's trying to distance himself from it, and like so that the people on Twitter won't know that he paid this person to write it.
So there's a couple of things here. If I were to steal man very, very quickly, the Twitter algorithm actually de-promotes any tweet that has a link in it.
Yeah.
So it could very well be that this is just him doing that. There's a reason, like, whenever I post on Twitter, there's an image, and then under that, there's a tweet afterwards.
But I mean, he also cropped the big word Timcast off of the left there. So
he did.
Like,
he very
his like, crop job is on him.
That was me very, very specifically trying to steal man, knowing that it's Tim acting in good faith is very outside of his purview.
Yeah, so I'm actually I have no interest in actually reading Tim's article. I did not read Tim's article. What I did do was I went and read the paper that he's saying. So people with narcissistic psychopathic tendencies are more likely to support left-leaning views, new research finds. So first and foremost, the study that found this is pre-registered. So it's on a preprint server. It has not been peer reviewed. It's just some guys did a survey and have now written a paper about the survey, and no one else has like given it the okay, this is good for publishing.
There's no peer review.
There is no peer review on it. So like now preprint is a good thing. People should register their studies for preprint because that helps fight p-hacking. Because if you register your study saying this is how I'm going to do it, if you then don't do it that way, that's a huge red flag. And that's a big problem in science. So pre-registering studies before you do them is a good thing. I am not shitting on that practice. However, you don't, like, except in like very cutting edge, kind of like all the research is still brand new sort of thing, you don't want to be referencing something that hasn't past peer review yet. And if you do reference it, you want to like make a note of like, hey, this thing that I'm referencing is a preprint, so like take it with a grain of salt, but like this is what they have allegedly found, sort of thing.
But here's the thing, I guarantee you that most people who have not ever had to assemble a bibliography, right, they don't know what preprint means. They have no idea what that word means. They've probably never heard that. Even if they have assembled a bibliography, they've probably never heard that.
Yeah.
Most layman people who aren't used to having to like do meticulous research, cite what they're saying in the middle of an argument, that's just not a thing that they're used to.
So my partner is studying to be a psychologist, or no, not a psychologist, psychotherapist. She's doing her master's in psychology. So yeah, I guess that would be a type of psychologist. I don't know the terms.
You're doing your best. It's fine.
Yeah. Actually, it's like her. She has me proofread all her papers and stuff before she submits them, and that's actually like been really helpful for me in like understanding how certain things are done and being able to figure stuff out for myself. And like it's great, I love it. But like she's doing her master's in psychology, and she did not, when we first started dating, she did not know what p-hacking was. Which, if you're not familiar, p-hacking is basically there's the p-value represents what are the odds that the null hypothesis is true? And the null hypothesis just being like, if I am hypothesizing something like all boys drive blue cars, that's my hypothesis. The null hypothesis would be not all boys drive blue cars, or boys don't all drive blue cars, or something along those lines. Like just the opposite of the hypothesis, basically. And so the p-value, it's generally considered statistically significant when your p-value is under 0.0, is it 0.05 or 0.005?
It'd be I think
Yeah,
it's
it's 0.05.
0.05.
It's 0.05 because what that means is that there's a 95% chance that whatever effect you saw is due to your or due to something other than the null hypothesis. You can't even say it's due to your hypothesis usually. It's just it's not the null hypothesis. There is actually something there.
This is the same reason why when we're doing studies on things like vaccines, when people are like, "Hey, look, the COVID vaccine caused these problems, but it's present in 0.0001% of the population." That's where the term "this is not statistically significant" comes from.
Yeah. So Donald Botger, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, says p-value is there's no there. That's essentially it. Yeah. So, but there are lots of ways you can manipulate the p-value after the fact. So, like, if you collect your data and then find that you're not like if you change your methodology partway through the study, that basically says that you are looking for positive results. You are fishing through the data that you have already collected and are now trying to find something significant, because it's just the nature of statistics. If it's 95% likely that it was your hypothesis and not the p-value, that means there's a 5% chance that it's just the null hypothesis. And since that is a thing, like 5% chance is not zero, there are going to be things that come up with a p-value of 0.05 that are just the null hypothesis, and it's just noise in the data. So p-hacking is when you take advantage of that and like manipulate things after the fact. And a lot of times it's done unintentionally. It's accidental. It's also done intentionally sometimes, but like this is why pre-registering is a good idea, because that prevents p-hacking. But anyway, their conclusions at best can be treated as tentative. Maybe this is true if it passes peer review. And even if it passes peer review, this is just one study. It's not conclusive at this point.
Peer review doesn't necessarily mean that the results you have are repeatable, or replicatable rather.
Yeah, so at best, this means we need more research on this topic. My second point here is they did not look at whether narcissists and psychopaths are more likely to be left-wing or right-wing. They only looked at whether people with greater left-wing authoritarian tendencies are also more likely to have narcissistic or psychopathic tendencies. So,
wait, isn't that working backwards? That's working backwards. You're looking at the person you don't like and then working backwards from there.
I might have rephrased this incorrectly. Now, they do say some stuff in there that makes me think they are working backwards, but this might just be me poorly rephrasing something here, so don't put too much stock into that.
Fair enough.
But what Tim's writer here, Adrian Norman. So people that are narcissistic and psychopathic with narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies are more likely to support left-wing views. That is not what the research found. What the research found is that people that are already on the left that have narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies will also tend to have a greater degree of left-wing authoritarianism, which was a very specific thing that they defined in their paper. And there were several metrics.
That's also a very different scenario than people who are on the left tend to support authoritarianism or tend to be neurotic.
So one of the things they actually said in the paper. Okay, let's back it up a little bit. Get away from the paper for a sec. I just want to put that we shouldn't be stigmatizing people that have narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. There are plenty of them out there that live full, happy, productive lives and are not running around murdering people or manipulating everybody to their own ends or whatever.
Should probably also clarify real quick, antisocial personality disorder is the DSM-5 classification for what used to be psychopathy and sociopathy.
Yes, they've been combined.
Yes.
Because I was struggling to figure out the difference back when I was doing my David Wood videos. And
the guy who was like, hey, back when I was not a Christian, I had a ball-peen hammer. Yes. And then that guy? Okay. Yeah, I remember that guy.
Because I pegged him as a sociopath before I found out that he just flat out says, yes, I'm a sociopath. I'm like, okay, I probably would have spent less time harping on that if I'd have known that was just a diagnosis you had.
Well, it's at least interesting to know that you pegged him. I hope you had a good time.
Yes. Well, that's actually a good example of those are videos of mine that are still up that my views have changed since then. I would not run around making fun of someone for being a sociopath at this point because I have learned since then. So you can go and watch me be an asshole, and I will be embarrassed at you watching that. But it's in the record that I changed my views, so that's
fair enough. It's learning.
So yeah. So anyway, so the study was only looking at people that are already leaning left and seeing if there was a correlation between how far you lean left and whether or not you have narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies. But on top of that, so like right there, like right off the bat there, it's like, okay, well, obviously people with these tendencies where they're more likely to be manipulating people for their own ends and they don't have the same level of empathy as most people. Like if they're malicious with their psychopathy or narcissism, yeah, they're going to gravitate towards authoritarianism. And they pointed out in the paper, the same is true of right-wing authoritarianism. The people on the right that have more narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies also gravitate more towards the authoritarianism version of being on the right. So what it comes down to is people with narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies tend to lean towards authoritarianism and will use whichever side of the political spectrum is expedient for them at the time.
It's a very cruel pragmatism, basically, because I mean, if you've got one of those personality disorders, generally all it means is that your mirror neurons do not function the way that a neurotypical person's mirror neurons function. That's the thing that allows you to put yourself in someone else's shoes, per se. Like when we're saying that as a turn of phrase, that's literally what your brain is doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyhow.
But it gets better, sirs. It gets better.
Oh dear.
So the study authors. Oh no, I should have kept the study open. Let me just. I want to see if I can bring it up.
People in my chat are noting that they're hearing Warcraft in the background, just going, "How are ya?"
Okay, that's scipost.org. Is that it? No, that's the... Okay, there we go. Bring it into my actual... Oh, come on. You know, one of the things that I actually like about Windows 11 that I haven't upgraded this computer to Windows 11 yet. Let's see, reject all these cookies. So this is the actual paper. But one of the things I like about Windows 11 is that you can actually like group when you snap it to the side of a window to the side of the monitor.
Yeah,
you can actually like group those and alt tab into the whole group instead of one by one.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is. That's like the first thing that I've been like on my laptop using Windows 11 being like, oh, I actually like this better than Windows 10. So yeah, so right here we have in two pre-registered studies. So there's two studies. One they looked at narcissism, one they looked at psychopathy, and they found basically the same thing. So there's two authors here, Anne Crispin's and Alex Bertram's. And I was curious, like, are these guys like obviously affiliated with like right-wing organizations or something? Like, do they work for Turning Points USA? And they just moonlight as scientists or whatever? No, they don't. They are legitimate scientists. Anna Crispin's usually publishes stuff along the lines of, what does she get? She does test anxiety. Like studying whether or not like things that impact test anxiety, how test anxiety plays out in people with different mental illnesses, stuff like that. That's usually her area of expertise. And Alex Bertram's usually publishes papers based about ego depletion and how it relates to sports, which I read a couple of the papers and I could get into the ego depletion thing, but I'm not going to because it's not really relevant. Just my point is, now this is not, again, it is not unheard of for scientists to, like, you don't have to spend your entire life studying one thing exactly. But it is kind of suspect that when you do like all of your papers are this one thing exactly, and then there's this other one that's completely different from it. But what's most interesting here, I decided to see how often do they publish together, because they work at the same university. They publish papers together sometimes, and and they do. There's a few, and usually the ones that they're publishing together are not related to either of their fields. However, they are also They have 7 papers that they published together. 3 of those papers, they're like down the list of like 15 authors somewhere, and they're like in the middle. They're not the primary author. They're just like, this was research that their university was doing, and they were involved in it, basically.
There were proximity being what it is.
I might have had that number wrong, but like there's a small number of papers where they're just involved tangentially, basically. Like they're authors of the study, but they're like not primary. There are 5 papers that they have authored together with no other authors. And these 5 papers are, let's see if you can figure out a pattern here. One looks at the tendency of, or the correlation between narcissistic traits and feminist activism. One looks at the correlation between narcissistic traits and anti-sexual assault activism. One looks at the correlation of narcissistic traits and LGBTQ activism. They left the T out of that one, which seems kind of suspicious.
I'm starting to get some bad vibes.
And
here.
then the 5th one was the 5th one is the one that find the one that doesn't belong. They looked at like what factors impact the behavior of eating meat, and like people reducing their eating of meat.
Veganism there would be the aim.
Just a second, I got a child.
Just now? A new one? Said, while on Twitch display, cleared the cache, restart a Firefox. I have no idea, Lantern. I have no idea.
Kid's telling me he needs to stay up late so that he can look for something that he needs to find by sometime next week. I was like, okay, we'll look for it tomorrow. So anyway, so here's the thing though. The correlation of the intentions to reduce to eat meat thing, so that one, I think what they were going to, so all of these have a very obvious like right-wing bias where they seem to be trying to get people to like come to certain conclusions with them. The reducing meat consumption thing, that one was interesting because like I think what they were going for there is like they compared the consumer's intention to what the consumer, like the perceived behavioral modifications. So things like meat is cheaper than vegetables or something like that, like external factors that would cause someone to reduce their meat consumption versus I just want to reduce my meat consumption. And their conclusion was basically like, well, the external factors don't matter. So what I think they were kind of aiming for there is like, oh, those left-wing hippies are trying to get us to go vegan, so we're going to say that like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what incentives you put on not eating meat. It's the consumer's intention that matters. Never mind that, the consumer's intention can be modified with incentives.
Yeah. It's like, what happens when you have two identical steaks, but one was grown in a lab and it cost half? Which one do you think is going to be bought 9 times out of 10? The one grown in a lab that cost half is probably eventually going to reach a point.
Jas is asking what university is this? They're affiliated with the University of Bern in Switzerland. So yeah, they're not even American, which is weird.
Let's go ahead and outsource our study just so we can get,
yeah,
we can get the results we want.
So now I looked at, all their studies, so they've got 5 studies that they've published together. 4 of them are preprints, not peer-reviewed.
What?
4 out of 5 of them are preprints.
And let me guess, the vegan, the meat eating one is the one that actually has some look into it.
Yes, but it
that's fucking funny.
Suris, it gets better.
Okay.
It gets better. So I wrote it down. Okay, so the meat paper is published in the journal Sustainability, which when I Googled it to see, because normally when a journal has like their title is just like one word, that means that they got to that one first and they're the old journal that it has.
Yeah, kind of like Nature.
So yeah, it's the good one, right? So I Googled it expecting to find out that Sustainability is the good journal on like sustainable practices and crap like that. But what I found was that it was one of the original 13 journals to be included in the official Norwegian list of possibly predatory journals. And then in 2022, the Norwegian National Publication Committee and Finnish Publication Forum determined that it is not an academic journal and removed it from the register of approved journals.
Why? Okay, so these are the people that Tim Pool is using to is looking to cite. So and this is how you got on your rabbit hole then, because you found this and went, hold on, this seems kind of fishy. I wonder what else there might be.
Yes, exactly. But Suris, it gets better.
Oh, God.
So like,
you've been okay. So for people in chat who don't realize this, Rhino has been like a small child in my DMs today. Oh my God, I can't wait to show you. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Then can you send something to me beforehand? No, I want your reaction live. Okay, sure.
So, well, someone ages ago in my chat, I think it was Progress Only, used, like, they got auto-corrected to duck instead of fuck, and they're talking about ducking this and ducking that all in my chat. It's just become a thing now. Yeah, still more effective peer review than the Answers Research Journal. And then Tim's audience won't check any of this. No, of course they won't.
In every situation where you're looking at the Answers Research Journal, you could just be looking at biologos.
Yeah.
And it would be better.
So anyway, so I feel like, so I didn't read all of the papers. Like this was the only paper that I actually dug into, but like I read the abstracts of the other ones. And a little bit further in a couple of them. And one of the things I noticed is they seem to be writing things in a way that make their statements very easy to cherry pick incorrect conclusions. So like the study that said that narcissism is a predictor of anti-sexual assault activism. So there was a sentence in there that, like, it says the results of multiple regression analysis show that higher narcissistic traits predicted an individual's higher involvement in anti-sexual assault activism over and above the covariates. That's a full sentence, complete sentence, full stop. Next sentence. However, this relationship was evident only for women in this sample. It's like, no, if it's evident only for women, you don't say that it showed higher narcissistic traits predicted in an individual's higher involvement in anti-sexual assault activism. You would say
in a woman's likelihood for this, so an individual.
The way I wrote this down when I was describing it was their paper that concludes that narcissism is a predictor of anti-sexual assault activism in women. That's how you say that.
As opposed to what they actually freaking did.
But they said, like, oh, it's predictive in individuals. By individuals we mean just women. Like we're excluding half of the population from individuals.
This is what happens when you take freaking the practices that you would use for clickbaiting and you bring them into a study as the way you're trying to do things. That's very bad.
Another thing that I noticed is that a lot of the titles of the studies were worded in such a way as to imply that the people they were looking at had been officially diagnosed with either narcissism or antisocial personality disorder. But when you actually read the study, it's just like a general population cross-section, and they also asked the what's it called? It's the 5-factor narcissism inventory. They included that as part of the survey. So like, if you score higher on that, then like you're not officially diagnosed with narcissism if you score high on that. But like, it's something like it's a test that will probably be a part of that diagnosis. But yeah, so like they title their things in a way that makes you think that we're talking about people that have been diagnosed with these things, but it's actually just we gave them those questions for the survey, and the ones that scored higher we just called narcissists.
So wait, hold on. So these people weren't even actually diagnosed with these behavioral disorders. They're just guessing they have them.
It's just a cross-sectional survey of the general population.
But then it's just this. Okay, so this moves from clickbait, because my initial thought was, okay, this is this is clickbait being utilized in a way that makes it seem like it is, as opposed to hyperbole and then there's some context. We have it looking like it's a study. Instead of that, no, it's just a lie.
Yeah.
Now it's just a lie, because now it's not a study that is measuring people that have these neurological conditions that we tried to contextualize in the beginning of this episode.
Well, okay, to be fair, the exact study that Tim Pool was referencing is not quite worded that way. So it's relations to dark personality traits, which is something that they reference a lot, which that kind of like, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about the whole, like, we need to revamp our language to, like, stop making dark bad and light good because it's racist. And, like, I can see, like, whatever. Like,
I disagree with that one, because it's not.
I don't think it's.
I don't think it's necessarily racist.
No, it's not necessarily, but like, and I don't know, like
the number of fear. Okay, humans fear the dark because of the unknown, not because they think black people are in it.
I know, but the number of times I have read, like, dark personalities in these papers is just like, ugh, that, like, I know it's not, but that sounds like you're relating it to race.
I can understand that. Because when you're reading it and it's from a group of people that like to do the 1350 meme.
Yes, Polydactyl Black Cat says dark and light as in sheer color spectrum is not racist. Yet I'm not saying that it is, and I'm not, like I said, I'm on the fence with that. I think there are some aspects of our language that, like, yeah, absolutely, I'm fine changing it, but, like, some of it just doesn't really matter. But, like, how many times I read that today, I just.
Fennec in my chat asked what the what meme, the 1350 meme. So the statement is, despite making up 13% of the population, what group of people are responsible for over 50% of the violent crimes? It's the
ones that whose narcissistic traits did not correlate with. See, that's okay. So the sexual assault activism thing, that's one that, like, I almost feel like there might be something like if the people know that the survey is with regards to sexual assault, that could impact how they're answering the narcissism questions, since it's not separated firmly. So, like, if they know it's about sexual assault, they're assuming that, like, all these questions are in the context of dealing with someone who has sexually assaulted someone. And in that case, like, I could absolutely see women who are inordinately more likely to be the victims of sexual assault being less empathetic towards the aggressors in a sexual assault situation. Like, I didn't see anything where they attempted to correct for that sort of thing, so I could definitely see that.
Yeah, no, that would make sense.
I'm now thinking of dark clouds because it just got gloomy. The weather is racist now. So
you kind of pre-prime yourself.
My son once drew a black rainbow. It just looked like a dick. Because he had the clouds and everything were black. And so it was like the balls on one end and the head on the other end. It was just a big black dick.
Jesus Christ.
Anyway, so these were all surveys, which, again, nothing wrong with surveys, but when you're trying to find out whether or not there's a correlation between narcissism and left-wing authoritarianism, that's the kind of thing where you would want to study specifically people that have been diagnosed with, like, narcissism or antisocial personality disorder or whatever. Like that's not the kind of thing that you do by a cross-sectional survey. That's something that you would do with people that have the diagnosis. Like, oh, you have these things that we're looking at. What are your political views? And even if you want to see how it relates to specifically left-wing, you like, as you're doing that, you can just exclude the people that fall right on the spectrum.
Basically, make it as neutral a survey as possible, and then select the data you need.
Blade Runner says, "I like black dick, and I can't deny you." No, I like black dick, and I cannot lie. You other brothers can't deny. When a guy walks in with a really big dick, and I don't know. I can't. I'm not good at freestyling.
I'm the want to distance myself from you just increased a little bit. Kidding. There was another thing in my chat where somebody said they might as well be spraying 1844. Is it 1488? 1488. 1488 is the 14 words and then 88 for Heil Hitler.
Hmm.
There's a lot of fun little and fun. I'm using fun very loosely here. Fun little. Hey, I use these numbers so that I can mask what I am. So if somebody puts like 1611, it means they're a KJV onlyist and a Christian fundamentalist. There's a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's agitating to keep track of all of this crap.
Yeah. And so what's even so my favorite part about all this is that if like reading through the abstracts and this paper in particular, they don't even conclude the things that the right-wing pundits want them to conclude. They just like make it easy to draw that conclusion from the way they write. So like after reading through it, they found that left-wing authoritarianism was statistically significantly predicted by the FFNI, that's the five-factor narcissism inventory, by the FFNI score for vulnerable narcissism, like that's a specific type of narcissism. But as soon as they controlled for various factors like age and gender, the FFNI ceased to be predictive for any aspect of left-wing authoritarianism.
That's interesting.
So like, as soon as they control for extraneous variables, the effect goes away. But that's not what the right-wing pundits are saying, because they're not.
They're
reading,
going to say that like
they're not reading down. Like they're not. Control F FFNI. Let's see, how far down is that? Pre-registered analysis, secondary analysis. Wait, was it? Yeah, here we go. In all of these regression analyses, the respective LWA, that's left-wing authoritarianism, score was statistically significantly predicted by the FFNI score for vulnerable narcissism. However, this FFNI score was no longer predictive for any of the respected LWA scores when we controlled for age, gender, self-deceptive enhancement, and impression management. So, like, this is in the methods section. Nobody reads the methods section of a study. That's like most people, they will read the abstract, and if they go any further than that, they might go to the discussion section if there is one.
Or the conclusion section.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, so yeah, no, the study does not say what the people are saying that it says. They just but the study authors clearly want people to draw that conclusion. So they wrote it in such a way as to lend themselves to misquoting and quoting out of context and stuff like that. And they have a history of writing studies specifically for that purpose. Like, at first I thought, like, maybe I'm being a little too hard, like, maybe I'm going too hard on the, like, oh, this study came from these authors, therefore it's unreliable thing. It's like, no, when you look at what they do together, the only thing that they do together is write studies whose headlines can be used for right-wing pundits and don't get published in anything reputable.
That's really frustrating because you don't want to be the person that is constantly saying that, because then somebody's going to hit you with like, hey, you're doing the genetic fallacy, you're saying the source is this, so therefore it's wrong. Then you're like, no, you don't understand. The only times they do this is when there is a goal.
And even in these studies that they do, apparently they have no intention of actually publishing. They just register the preprint.
They just write it and go,
and let the headlines do what they will. They still don't even find what the people say they find.
They just have to write everything in such a way that the conclusions they're trying to reach are front loaded.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my afternoon, was reading their papers and diving into their publication history, and oh god, I got so deep into stuff that I didn't even bring up because it's irrelevant, but I want to know, like, you know, like, is ego depletion related to this at all? So I'm like, what is ego depletion? And looking into that, I'm like, oh, ego depletion is like a real thing that like happens to me. So like that's that thing where like, if you exert a lot of self-control, you run out of it eventually, and if you're in situations that require self-control for too long, eventually you will lose that self-control and just give in.
You mean that thing that happens with Catholic priests?
Oh, God. I didn't even
I-
think of that. Why'd you have to bring the
I'm-
mood down, Suris? We were
I'm
just
sorry,
just
but-
having a good time talking about how psychopaths are all left-wing authoritarians.
Look, you asked me to exert self-control for a long period of time, Rhino. It only makes sense that eventually I would lose it.
Yeah, but that's the thing that confuses me, though, is because that like the self-control thing, that's Alex Bertram's that does those ones, and he seems to come very much out on the side of like, no, self-control is finite. You do lose it eventually, and like when he's questioned that, he like gets angry about it and like writes scathing replies to people that like question his work on it, and was like, that seems kind of social justicey for a guy writing papers like this on the other, like, on his off time. So
It makes you wonder, and this is where I get tinfoil hatty. It makes you wonder if money has exchanged hands at any point for the purpose of getting these through. Because if the papers aren't being written to go through the peer review process to get cited or not get cited, to not have people look through and try to replicate the results of the studies, then for what purpose? And my again, maybe this is just me being very, very jaded, probably incredibly jaded. My brain immediately goes to, okay, who's paying you? And maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's not a fair place for it to go, but
well, here's the thing.
Where it goes.
If it stays as a preprint, then it's not technically misconduct to not report who's paying you.
I did not know that.
Well, I don't know that either. I'm just assuming because like that's one of those things where like if it gets published, then you have to declare your financial potential conflicts,
your financial
of interest.
backers.
And like you should. I feel like that's one of those things that's like best practices in the preprint. But like if you don't do it, that's just something that like you're going to get feedback on later.
Well, don't worry. We don't have to report that, an entire private school was funded by one person who wanted you to come to certain conclusions. We also don't have to report all the golf trips that you took repeatedly.
Oh,
and
God.
I'm just saying that
Okay. I'm going to get another beer. I'm going to get another beer. You shut up.
Look, I'm just saying maybe we should hold people who write studies to the same standards that apparently we don't hold Supreme Court justices to. Constance in my chat goes, I hear fighting games. No, that is me leveling up a paladin in World of Warcraft in the background because with my life being a giant roller coaster, I have sought comfort games. Pernia in my chat says, is Suris driving Rhino to drink? Look, I'll repeat what I said when Rhino was AFK. All I'm saying is maybe we should be holding both Supreme Court justices and also people who write studies to similar standards. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, you'd think one would have a higher standard than the other.
You would think that, but no. My comment section, some rando in there has definitely told me 100%. No, one corrupt Supreme Court justice doesn't mean that the entire thing is ruined. I'm like, actually, yes, it does. There's only 9 of them. If a certain percentage of your body is gangrenous, I'm willing to just say your body's gangrenous.
If more than 10% of your body is gangrenous, that's pretty severe.
That's what we would call statistically significant.
Yeah. The p-value is less than 0.05.